I'm at the World of Samsung 2025 launch event in Frankfurt, and I've been given an exclusive opportunity to go hands-on and measure 3 exciting new Samsung TVs for the year ahead, namely the 83-inch Samsung S95F flagship OLED, the 75-inch QN990F flagship 8K Neo QLED, and also a 65-inch The Frame Pro. And we don't really have a lot of time because I've only been given 1 hour to spend on each TV. So come follow me, look behind the scenes to see what I measure and what I found. So I'm standing beside the Samsung 83-inch S95F OLED TV flagship at the moment. This is the biggest S95 series of OLED TV that Samsung has done. So I only have less than probably 40 minutes to do a quick hands-on. So what I'm going to do now is to quickly profile the TV using a CR100 colorimeter profile against the CR250 spectral radiometer using Kalman Ultimate software. I want to make sure that this is in HDR filmmaker mode. So on peak white you get 2200 nits, and this is on spec actually with the 2200 nits that Samsung has provided for their smaller QD OLED based S95F. And then we'll measure the color saturation. I'm very impressed. If you look at these delta errors here, they are very, very low, which means that the HDR color should be very accurate when it translates to actual viewing on screen. And then I'm going to measure the DCI-P3 and also the REC 2020 coverage of this 83-inch S95F. I expect it somewhere in the region of 83% BT 2020 in UV terms, right? So at least I know I got somewhere close to 83. I just want to clarify that the default out-of-the-box settings would be color space auto, and then the color gamut would be DCI-P3. This will deliver the most accurate colors from this TV. But in terms of the color space coverage, it will only cover 72% of BT 2020 in UV terms. If you want a larger color space coverage, you have to go into that, change it to custom, and then change the color gamut to BT 2020. This will allow you to achieve 83% or even 84% of BT 2020 in UV terms, but the color saturation tracking won't be as accurate. And if I had more time, I will probably go into the color space menu and start adjusting some of these figures to try and see if we can get it to track more accurately. But today we are really running out of time, so this is just something that I want to point out. We are also interested in measuring the full field brightness of this 83-inch Samsung S95F. And if I display a full wide window and start measuring, you can see that the peak light output is 400 nits, which is amazing because even, let's say, the LG G5, which uses the same panel, the maximum that I've measured is around 360 nits. By achieving 400 nits, what Samsung Electronics has done is to actually match the full field white output of their QD OLED panels on the 55, 65, and 77-inch models, which are capable of around 390 to 400 nits. This is the spectral power distribution of LG Display's latest new 4-stack primary RGB tandem OLED panel. You can see that in terms of the peaks, the blue, the green, and also the red, they are more distinct than previous W OLED panels, and it is just narrower peaks and sharper peaks that allow for a wider color gamut coverage up to 83% of BT 2020 in UV terms. So this is clearly a W OLED panel, you can see from the different subpixels. And interestingly, because of the matte anti-glare coating that Samsung has implemented on this panel, you can probably see a slightly hazier glaze even in the macro shot. And however much I try to focus, don't think there's any way I can actually make it sharper. So a lot of people buy Samsung OLED TVs because of their gaming responsiveness. They have some of the lowest latency on the market. So what I'm going to do now is to use the Leo Bodnar tester to measure the input lag on this 83-inch Samsung S95F. And to do that, we will have to kick the TV into game mode. So we will force the TV to go into game mode. can see the game bar popping up. And then if we measure the 60 frames per second lag, it will slowly go down. It takes some time to clear the cache. So at 60 frames per second, you get 9.1 milliseconds of input lag, which is definitely among the lowest on the market. And then what we'll do is we'll measure the 120 frames per second lag as well. And it is halved exactly to 4.6 milliseconds, because obviously 120 frames per second is double the refresh rate of 60 frames per second, which means that the input lag will be halved. And this is in line with Samsung OLED TVs over the past few years, in that they usually have some of the lowest input lag on the market. And one unique selling point of Samsung TVs is that even in game mode, they allow some sort of frame interpolation. If you engage the Game Motion Plus setting, you can see that the input lag is still very decent, very reasonable at 21 milliseconds, which means that you can probably introduce some sort of interpolation to 60 frames per second games to make 30 frames per second games look slightly smoother if you so wish, without increasing the input lag substantially. So this is probably the only 83-inch matte WOLED panel with a 4-stack tandem OLED because of Samsung's decision to implement their superb anti-glare coating on all of their flagship S95F OLEDs, including this 83-inch version. I can see that, in terms of the reflections, it certainly mutes it very well. Even, with the bright light, mutes it very, very well. It's a matte screen, but obviously, it will gray it out slightly. And some of you may prefer a glossy coating to impart more depth to the picture. But I think, in a correct living environment, this matte coating can work wonders to reduce reflections to make the picture actually watchable in a very, very bright room. So this is Samsung's flagship QN990F 8K Neo QLED TV, and it's got a gorgeous design, beautifully slim bezel. But one of the unique selling points of this TV is definitely its wireless One Connect box. And to show you how it works, basically, I'm trying to measure this TV using my laptop and my meter and my signal generator. But because this One Connect box is separate, it can be placed anywhere in the room. So I have my signal generator here, and I'm going to use my own cable to connect it directly to the wireless One Connect box, which allows for very flexible installation and placement. But this is just to showcase the wireless One Connect box in terms of how far you can actually place it from the TV, making it very easy for you to integrate the TV and also the One Connect box into your home decor. So the first thing, when I want to even measure the basic brightness of any display, I have to make sure that my meter is profiled correctly. So HDR peak brightness on the Samsung S95 QN990F measured around 2000 nits on a 10% window in HDR filmmaker mode. Because we need to do filming in a brighter environment, I can't actually seal the meter, which is why the black level is raised according to the measurements. But in a dark room, this shouldn't be a problem. And after doing that, what we'll do is to measure the color gamut. 94% DCI-P3 and 75% of Rec 2020. And if we go back and measure the full screen brightness, in terms of full field white, the peak brightness is around 480 nits. This is lower than many of the 4K mini LED TVs on the market. And this is because the higher pixel density of 8K resolution on this QN990F means that there's less light transmittance. So you need a more powerful backlight to pump through more light. And I think this is probably as good as it can get for an 8K screen in terms of the full field brightness. So I fired up the CRI app to measure the spectral power distribution of this Samsung QN990F. And as expected, you can see beautifully distinct red, green, and blue wavelengths, which is typical of quantum dot color technology. So there's no doubt whatsoever that this is a true QLED TV. If you look at just how small the sub-pixels are, you can definitely tell that this is an 8K screen. And from what I can see, even though it might be obscured very slightly by the anti-glare coating in front of the backplane, it's a 4-domain VA-type LCD panel, and it appears that some dithering is probably used to achieve a wider viewing angle as well. Just switch this TV into game mode, and at 60 frames per second, the input lag is around 36 or 37 milliseconds. It's just caused by it's 21. So according to Samsung, the reason why the input lag was higher than expected when I tested game mode earlier at both 60 frames per second and also 120 frames per second is because of the latency that is introduced by the wireless One Connect box. Now there is a way to bypass it because there's a micro HDMI port at the back of the TV, and if you connect it directly to the console, hopefully that will allow for a much lower input lag. So key to the AI gamma function on any of Samsung's 2025 TV is to make sure that the AI mode is engaged, and if the lights are turned on, then once ambient light is detected by the light sensor on the TV, it will use this data together with real-time analysis of the content to brighten near black gamma if necessary to make dark HDR content more watchable in a bright room while still preserving the creative intent to a certain degree. One of the upgrades on the Frame Pro over a regular frame is that Samsung has found that more and more people pay more attention to the picture performance. This is a 120Hz screen, by the way, which is double the refresh rate of the frame. So you can see that the Frame Pro 65-inch model has an HDR peak brightness of almost 1000 nits on the 10% window in the most accurate HDR filmmaker mode. And I'm just going to measure the color gamut very quickly. So DCI P3 color gamut coverage of 95% and Rec 1020 coverage of 79% in UV terms. Oh, and before I forget, let me measure the full screen brightness as well. Okay, a very respectable full screen brightness of above 700 nits, which means that this TV should be good enough for use even in a fairly bright room. So I've managed to use the CR250 spectroradiometer to capture the spectral power distribution of Samsung the Frame Pro. And if you look at these beautifully distinct red, green and blue wavelengths, they are indicative of quantum dot technology. Therefore, this is definitely a QLED. So today, we've taken a first look at three Samsung TVs, namely the 83-inch Samsung S95F flagship OLED, the 75-inch Samsung QN990F flagship 8K Neo QLED, and also a 65-inch the Frame Pro. If you are undecided about which Samsung TV to buy, one place where you can get good advice is at Richer Sounds, a trusted British AV retailer with more than 50 stores in the UK, who provides 6 years warranty on the vast majority of TVs. If you join the company's VIP club, you will get the best deals through cheaper VIP exclusive in-store-only prices, complimentary gifts or freebies. So go visit your local Richer Sounds store or call telesales for your next TV purchase. Thanks again for your support. Now, if you would like to see the upgrade that the S95F has over last year's S95D, I have done a side-by-side comparison video you can watch by clicking here.